All right, welcome to your next lesson for the first week of our new semester. This is lesson 52, Radio H Radio 53 part-timers. Okay, and I know it says there's 6 of 12. We should be moving on to 7 of 12, but all right, right in the middle of compiling news, sports, traffic, and weather. So yes, so far we have covered news, we have covered traffic and weather, and now we start looking at sports today, right? This comes from your textbook, Next Level Radio, Chapter 5, 5.3.2, which is reading the bulletin. It looks exactly like yesterday, actually. And then news anchoring 275 to 282 from Beyond Powerful Radio, right? Okay, so just the entire, just kind of to summarize as to what it is that we're going to be chatting about. We're chatting about sports over here, right? Sports today. So I've got two newscasts from sports, I would say sports readers, but they're anchors. And for me, the difference is that there's more conversation, right? So it's more conversational, kind of more of a specialty show or feature or segment. Specifically, these ones, obviously, we're going to be looking at something more visual, which, excuse me, right, is obviously TV related, and we're going to start off with one in just a moment, right? But for yourself, kind of ask yourself whether you know, not know, but maybe you can guess what would be the difference between a sports reader and a news reader, right? So, still, let's look at similarities. Maybe that'll help you. So, similarities still factual, right? Obviously, still professional. Obviously, the third one would be there's still structure, right? The inverted pyramid still applies to sports writing as well. And still you would use things like, for example, sound bites or edits or whatever it may be, right? And again, in terms of systems, still the same thing, right? And where do you belong? You still belong under the news department, right? So you still answer to the same boss. But then there is there's a slight, but in terms of effect, in terms of kind of aesthetics, right? Of what a sports bulletin looks, feels, sounds like is very different from a traditional news one, right? And that is really kind of the attitude and the delivery of the actual presenter themselves, right? So you've watched some sports anchors and then obviously sports field reporters and then sports analysts and whatever it may be. And there's kind of, I'm not going to say friendlier attitude, right? But it's much more informal. Okay, so not informal to the extent that now they're chilling with like beers and whatever it may be, and they're just saying whatever they want, and it's not like that. So, but it's more approachable, right? So, sports is recreational. Sports is not necessary. I'm saying to you, in life, we don't need sports where we do actually need to know the news. We do need to know the weather, even if it's not in a formalized structure. So, for example, like it's presented to us within a news context, we would really like to know, man, why is it so hot today, or why is it so cold, or where's this coming from? It's just being I'm trying to, for example, it's a silly example, but it's still an example. So, someone that works outside, like an architect or a builder, or whatever it may be, and so many people that have jobs that are clearly, obviously, like outside, are affected by rain or storms or floods or this, whatever. You would like to be able to seek some more guidance, right? So it would be more, it's more important, and I'm going to give a big budget in just a moment so that I don't drag down sports. I'm not trying to do that, right? To know again what financial indicators are currently at or sitting at, because my rand is I mean, it's being affected. Maybe what's in my wallet is being affected. The price on the obviously on the stalls, whatever, in the shops, whatever, are affecting me as well. And that's because of an exchange rate, right? Weakening rand, whatever it may be, right? Okay, and markets, etc., etc., gold, platinum, can carry on, right? But then we come to sports once again, right? And you don't, there are many people that go throughout their lives, and never mind their days of the weeks, whatever it may be, and don't need, as I said, they don't need to know fixtures, they don't need to know who's playing who, and they don't need to know like who won which cup or whatever it may be, right? So sports are purely recreational, right? Why do they form such a massive, massive factor in people's lives? I'm saying to you, and so the sports are reflected within our product, obviously our radio product, our on-air product, is because um, never mind, let's say on a global level, where I keep saying this because it's always interesting to know, that that with the English, the English and the soccer, they're crazy. They are literally crazy. And I'm saying to a point where they are violent, right? Which is okay, it's cool to be fanatical and stuff, right? But because soccer was or football, right, as you know, overseas called football, so football was so extremely popular that it became something that was an everyday sport, right? So it was an everyday, like you would find a match being played, let's say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, right? As opposed to when sport normally happens, it normally happens Friday, Saturday, mostly, and Sunday, mostly, right? Okay, and so what soccer did is that it broke through a barrier and showed basically the world, not because it was trying to prove it, but it showed us something really cool and something interesting about sports, that it can be indulged and can be also held and obviously spotlighted throughout the week, which makes it relevant to our listeners' lifestyle. Right? We want to understand. Remember, the basics of radio is to be able to understand the listener's lifestyle. So we know in South Africa we have major, major, major sports followings: our rugby, our soccer, and our cricket specifically. Right? Okay, so we know that like let's say Test cricket or let's say T20s or whatever it may be, they happen during the week. They don't necessarily happen always on a weekend. So it's something that definitely we would want to include and obviously make our listeners aware of what's happening, who's winning, whatever wickets or have been had by one team to another, sixes not exactly sixes, but maybe if let's say one of the players have hit like a number of six sixes in a row, you'd actually include that in your bulletin, right? But like with cricket, rugby, and soccer, because that's where our biggest fandom and support goes to. So, and I'm carrying on, but it's a good intro just to kind of introduce this, right? We don't stop there. There are so many sports that are obviously active. So in other words, that exist within the world and within our country as well. Netball, Formula One, um, uh, uh, tennis, for example. I want to do the big ones first as well, as opposed to let's say the smaller ones. Athletics, and so what happens is when we try, for example, I'm gonna try and say to you, oh, well, which ones come first? I don't really know. I don't know what to tell you. Obviously, we think of soccer coming first, and trying to pick, let's say, three or four stories for our sports bulletin. And what is it? Well, we need to cover sport, so soccer, for example, then rugby, then cricket, and then the other stuff too. But it really isn't always like that. We have to look at it contextually and say, well, I mean, if the Olympics are let's say currently running, we would always start with let's say Olympic news, so what updates, what medals, which athletes are doing what. Like there's been I think, what do they call it? Like, it's not a practice run, but for example, they do a couple of practice runs. I'm not the biggest sports pro, but like let's say they're doing relays or they're doing sprints, they're doing whatever it is. There's there's a couple of like tests, beforehand to see kind of gauges to maybe who might be the winner, whatever it may be. But also, I'm guessing there's a benefit for the actual athletes themselves. Anyway, right, we have the Winter Olympics, also really very big. We have oh man, I'm trying to go like things like even oof, this is a stretch, but it does still happen quite largely. It's like things like badminton, and then we have hockey, and we have ice hockey. Like in the States, they're crazy about it there. So it would be massive, massive, massive there. So it would dominate, let's say, for example, let's say lead stories and top stories or whatever. But then also, and this is where I'm going to stop, right? Because then I can get into the lesson. But also we have politics, right? So politics, 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 which then lead obviously the bulletin itself, the sports bulletin itself, because we need to know, like, if there are scandals, like we had, I think it was a rugby star, so a rugby athlete of ours that had come back from one of obviously like the tours, right? And he was tested positive for cocaine, and he was suspended. Like that is so that's a big news story, right? And obviously that tops the charts, should I say, when we say, okay, well, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about that. That's politics, right? And also, like, we're waiting for an apology, because that man is accountable to the nation, kind of representing South Africa, but also, I'm quite sure that a lot of the fans were kind of disappointed in him, and he's got to build trust back in, or whatever it may be. It doesn't matter, right? I don't want to judge the person, whatever it may be, right? Um, uh, we've had enough scandals within sports, like fixing games and that type of stuff. Hartziekronieer, Manus van Westhuizen, really difficult stuff, I'm saying to you, difficult stuff to have to kind of swallow as a fan. This would then obviously, it would, I want to find a fancy word for like outranking, but anyway, it would definitely push back every other news story to maybe a second or third or fourth, position, and then obviously headline the bulletin itself, right? We also have changing of coaches. We also have changing of captains. We also have dismantling of clubs, things like that, and let's say big international players like soccer players being bought out, or maybe one of our own soccer players are bought by, let's say, Tottenham or Man United, or who knows? Doesn't matter, right? I think you understand so far. So, writing for news, we need to once again. This is no surprise that accuracy is totally important. Accessibility, one. So, like in terms of when I say accessibility, man, like where can I find it? For example, like how close is it to me? Like in other words, again, what is my access to the particular sport itself, right? And its transmission or its broadcast or whatever it may be, right? Again, context for that particular match or that particular story. And then also, this is different, okay? Is that we want a sports analyst, for example. I'm just going to take the bigger, broader position, because sports analysts are allowed to do a lot of things, opinion, interaction, kind of like for like forecasts, whatever it is, predictions, whatever it may be, right? We'd like obviously opinion, and so now you start seeing a little more of the lifestyle side of sports itself, right? And so you could definitely understand why this is again recreational. Okay, so I'm just sharing my screen. I hope that this isn't more jarring than what I used to do, because I used to stop the share and go here, whatever it is. It's easier just to share the screen. But I've got, let's say, one spot you can see. Like, I wanna try one of these ones here, because this is a very popular format, where you get the analysts on both sides. One of them is 10-1, normally an ex sports player, like a football coach, or a one of the whatever it is. I'm not going to try guess like positions, in sport, but like captain or whatever it may be. Right. Let's go have a look at one of those.
Right, let's get more on this now with Mark McAdam and a couple of other things as well. The main question most of my mates are asking me right now is how can Liverpool afford to sign Alexander Isak? Can you explain it to them and to everyone else watching, please?
Well, we'll try and make it quite simple for people at home because it can be quite confusing the way PSR operates within the Premier League. You've seen clubs like Everton and Nottingham Forest suffer with points deductions because they haven't basically abided by the rules. And people are going, well, how come a club like Liverpool go and spend huge sums of cash and still fall within the rules? And ultimately, PSR is all about your permitted allowable losses. So for a side like Liverpool, who turn over £614 million in their last set of accounts, they can afford to spend a lot more than a club like Newcastle, who turned over 320 million in their last set of accounts. Look at this. This is the net spend on transfers since 2021-2022. This includes the last 9 transfer windows. So it is a lot of spending over the last few years in the Premier League. And you can see Chelsea right out in front with 852 million. But they're, again, a side that generate a lot of commercial income. They have a higher turnover than Newcastle, for example, so it allows them to spend more money on transfers. You can see Manchester United right up there as well, Arsenal at 611 million, and you can see that the change in dynamic between Arsenal and Spurs and then Liverpool. Now, what's really important to point out with regards to these particular net spend figures, Liverpool's doesn't include the sale of Luis Diaz, which we know is around 75 million euros, so around £65.5 million. So if you take that off of Liverpool's figure, it means their net spend since 21-22 is actually less than Newcastle's.
Wow.
Now, the reason why it's less is because they're very well run. They're very clever with what they do in the transfer market. They recycle cash, which means they sell players, bring money in, and then reinvest that money into other players. They don't very often go and spend big in the transfer market. They always wait for the right type of player to become available. The likes of Virgil van Dijk, they spent big on him. Alisson the same. And then, of course, in this window, they've identified players that they feel they can make a big investment on that are going to have a massive effect on their starting 11 and their squad. For example, Luis Diaz was a player they signed in January, a number of years ago. They paid £37.5 million for him with some add-ons. They've just sold him for 66 million. So therefore, they've sold a 28-year-old, made a huge profit on him. And of course, that looks good when you look at the accountancy and the PSR calculations. So yeah, so it's really positive stuff as far as Liverpool are concerned. And you can see that whilst they are spending a lot of money, they're also bringing in a lot of money. And you just have to look at this summer. Luis Diaz, 65, 66. Trent Alexander-Arnold, 10 million. Jarell Quansah, 35 million. Nat Phillips, 2.5 million. So already, whilst they may have spent 300 million, which is the top end, and including all of the add-ons, at the minute, their actual outlay this summer is probably about £150 million. Yeah. Incredible stuff. You can see one of those players, Luis Diaz, arriving in Munich. He left Tokyo last night. He arrived in Munich. He's completed his medical now before he officially gets confirmed as a Bayern Munich player. We know that his first training session for Bayern Munich is going to be on Thursday morning. He'll get officially confirmed Thursday afternoon, where he'll meet the media for the first time and go through that very first press conference. So, yeah, Luis Diaz leaving Liverpool, but once again, it represents huge profit for them. Really sensible, clever, astute business. They're very well run. And right now, the fans and the sporting director, Richard Hughes, and Michael Edwards are seeing the fruits of all of that careful spending over the last few years. It's enabling them now to go and strengthen that Arne Slot squad and do it in some style.
Yeah, and that's worrying for the rest of the Premier.
Excuse me for the throat clearing there. Right, really cool. Very... So there's, I don't want to say, there's nothing sexier than a reporter who knows this stuff, man. But there are many things that are sexier than that. But I mean, I love a journalist who really knows their stuff. Now, we know that 10-1, these are previous players because, and no offense to them, there's nothing wrong with that, right? You can see their nuances are definitely not kind of on the media side, you understand, in terms of being able to stand a certain way, kind of conduct yourself in a certain way. You definitely see this guy over here. He's definitely an ex-player, just the way that he's uncomfortable, whatever it may be. But you see, it doesn't really matter, because the thing is that, like, for example, obviously this particular sports, I would say analyst, because this is an analyst, he's analyzing the transfer of this guy, the selling out, the buying of different players, whatever it may be, as well as obviously the net spend and so on for different clubs. uh, like, he knows stuff. Got his little paper there. That's fine. Doesn't matter. You know that this guy is 120,000% an absolute quote unquote, not fan only, but he's a connoisseur of the sport of football, right? Of English football. So a really good example to kind of start
Him in
off
one of the
with.
top teams in the country this weekend, right?
We'll get to this one in just a moment. I wanted to just kind of see that difference between, the British to the Americans, and there's kind of like this little desk format here. They got their notes, and just one thing to also note, the complete rise and dominance of female anchors and female field reporters when it comes to sports it's so commonplace these days that you want to ask yourself why. There is no, I mean, there is one, there's a lot of reasons why it's better to have a female sports journalist and anchor than there are men, right? And we're not going to get into that right now. But if you just have a look, just kind of flip through your Super Sports and your SCB Sports, whatever it may be, right? And go and look who is presenting, who is on the field. You're going to find that there's a lot more women that are doing it within this sector of media than anyone else, right? Okay, so we'll look at that in just a moment. Let's go through the slides. Let's go through the class, right? Okay, the basics. As a radio sports writer, there are two different destinations on radio for you and your work, right? So they require slightly different styles of writing. So the one is obviously the bulletin, right, or the sports program, right? These destinations, sorry, are the news bulletin or the sports program, right? So the sports specialty show, like you saw now in the clip, that definitely you can say, oh, I've also heard that on radio. This really elongated, very, and I'm using that word from previous, but it's true. That's the right word. I'm using it from previous presentation, right, or lesson. But elongated obviously means it's got a lot more body. It takes up a lot more time. Let's say 10 to 15 minutes. Complete sports specialty segment on a show, 10 to 1 more likely on a drive show on a particular day, like a Friday or whatever it may be, where obviously the sports presenter takes the lead, takes control, and starts to obviously do kind of the sports analysis, speaks to some people on the line, that type of stuff. I mean, I even remember, and it's not because it's not a new thing, right? It's been done for decades now. But I would remember on my Friday afternoon, should I say, drive show back on campus, even like half an hour would be dedicated only to sport around. I think it was maybe in the last hour of the show. So maybe 6 to 7 o'clock would be taken over by one of the sports anchors, right? And then they would do, like I say, interviews, etc. I'm saying the actual DJ would take complete back seat and not even. Well, I mean, I suppose sometimes you would chime in, but it's not your time. You understand? And banter doesn't need to be had between, let's say, the sports anchor and the presenter, but there does need to be fluidity, as I always say. So you can't just disappear, right? You got to be present within that. It's still your show. It doesn't matter side by right. Okay. Also, so know what's going on. So also know fixtures, right? And the dates of fixtures are saying, like, this team is playing this team, or that team played this team and they won, let's say, by 2-0, or they won by 168 runs with whatever, seven wickets. I think that's what they say also, is just when they bat someone out, right, or whatever. They not bat someone out, but they yeah, well, they hit a wicket. That's when I get the person. Oh boy, I must. You can see I struggle with sports, right? But I do understand them. I understand them enough. My vocab around that. I'm not going to pretend to be that dude that was speaking now on BBC Sport, right? The dates, the venues, major tournaments, etc. Keep a diary of or a file of tour dates, programs for events like the Olympics, and drop sheets for tournaments like Wimbledon. Big, 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 following big popularity, and definitely something that's put into people's calendars, whether you're even a sports fanatic or not. People like the tradition of watching, for example, Wimbledon or a World Cup or taking part in things like that, right? Anyway, that way you'll know what to look for when you are compiling a bulletin, and you'll also know the implications of their results when the teams or individual players are drawn to play against one another. Okay, let's go to another slide here. Look, and just as a sidebar note, you know what? Let's take. I'm going to take myself as an example because I'm a great example of someone that is not interested in sports, right? Okay, and that is just a thing of mine, right? But I don't think I've given sports much of a chance because when I look at, let's say, when I was touring I keep looking at the World Cup, the Soccer World Cup, and I keep saying this because it was a really it was a big project. I'm saying to you, when I say a big project, as a presenter and as a journalist as well, now I had to act on that type of stuff, cover so much stuff, find stories, etc., speak to people, whatever it may be. Like, you know what? After 6 weeks of doing that, right? Because it's 6 weeks away from home, and traveling to different places, meeting different people, watching every single match that happened, whatever it is, right? Um, I kind of, uh, not kind of, I 100% fully, excuse me for the snort, right? Um, fully got into it, understood all, was able to have conversations with. I also really enjoyed it because you know what? It isn't about, again, the sport only. It is about the camaraderie that let's say a fan associates with the sport. I'm going to go meet with my friends. I'm going to go to a bar. I'm going to go to a club. I'm going to, whatever it is, host a braai, whatever it may be, right? Okay. It's linked to that, right? And it's linked to relaxation, and it's linked to my time only, that type of stuff, right? So again, kind of seeing that, it's really one. Obviously we value sports because to teach kids, for example, and to teach people about being involved in sports is super crucial to their development, because you understand loss and you understand win and you understand training and you understand dedication and commitment and being a team player and strategy and this and that, whatever it is, doesn't matter, right? Okay, well, which is I mentioned because it's a good foundation for you to understand what might drive you to be a great sports anchor, analyst, presenter, right? And why it is that people love what it is that you have to speak about. It will excite you because, one, you have to become proficient. I keep saying this again. No station, and no TV station, and no let's say print or digital print mogul or monopoly. I'm not sure, right? Okay, will hire you as a sport anything if you don't know about anything about sports. Okay, so just know that from now. And what I would do is I would start with sports. Ideally, if you do have some kind of maybe a dream or whatever it may be, right, to maybe follow within this direction, I would start with sports you do enjoy, right, and really don't only just watch the matches, but go, like I say, go to clubs, go create your own, obviously, content around, going to watch matches and sitting with fans and whatever it may be, and you do your own sports analysis, like on like IG Live or like TikTok Live, whatever it may be. Really cool stuff here. Anyway, understand the sports, that's a big thing, and sports are very complicated. Hence why me and the terminology, I can't even get the basics right. But I'm sure if I do study and I do watch and I do commit, I'll get it right, right? That's the thing, right? So will you. Another story that you're trying to tell. So a few things will damage your credibility as badly as a sports presenter or reporter that doesn't know anything about the event, hasn't been to the news conference, doesn't make any sense, asking questions to players that just are contextually incorrect. I don't even know, even semantically incorrect. Whew, there you go, you're done, right? Do not presume that listeners know as much as you do. So you really have to dumb it down because, as I just said, sports is very complicated. It has its own set of rules, it has its own textbook, it has its own, and it's always updated. Remember that as well, because technology comes in as well for analysis. And you would note that specifically when you're watching, let's say, cricket, right? So, cricket will, while they are changing, let's say, batsmen or bowlers or whatever it may be, right? You would find that the commentators would then go and sit and analyze, let's say, the last, whatever it is, the last hit, the last bat, let's say, whatever it may be, right? Or even kind of like I said, the way that the bowler has um, uh, I don't know. I was going to say the last ball that was played, which is better, right? Because you can picture it yourself. You see those kind of like that computer generated analysis of where the ball might have gone or what happened or whatever or how close they were to being. I think it's out of boundaries. I think that. Well, I'm really impressing myself, right? Anyway, right. Things like that. So you would have to really know a lot about that as well. And then remember that you are, again, sort of just like with anything else in radio, speaking to a larger audience and they need to listen and understand because they are passively active, right? So players and athletes are not your friends, absolutely not. So this may be one of the unwritten rules that are most often broken. And you need to remember athletes, sorry, are a part of your job, not your private life, right? So there are going to be times where you have to sit down in judgment to ask them some really tough questions, right? And yes, you might have created some kind of bond over seeing them over time, whatever it is, creating great interviews. They would know you as a high kind of a high class reporter, that type of stuff. Doesn't matter. You've got to keep business and pleasure, quote unquote, separate. Can I just quickly? I'm just going to just pause here. I need to blow my nose. I'll be back in a moment. Give me a second. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. All right. So let's continue on. So it's not always about big games and big sports in South Africa. We really obviously, again, as I said, focused on that. We mustn't forget about like golf and cycling, netball, etc. There are so many things that are happening, so many sports that are happening around our country just alone. Oh, water. Right, okay. That again, almost like, you know what, if it's a small story, you're a small journalist, genuinely. Like, if so if you, when I say that, some stories, yes, definitely are not as important as others, and they are small stories and they maybe belong in a community context, as opposed to, let's say, more commercial or a professional. That sounds awful. I'm not. I'm going to take that back, right? But a more proficient environment, like, let's say, commercial or let's say public television or whatever it may be, right? Yeah, but the thing is that if you are so going back to the small story, if you consider something a small story just because it doesn't have like our top rugby player, or it doesn't have like thousands and thousands of fans at the game or whatever, and it's based on aesthetics alone, well, then you're just a poor person. Like I'm saying to you, you're just you're a person with bad judgment, man. And that's going to fall on you. Right, so just be careful of that, please, because we would do the same thing. I said it's not special to sport, it's special to radio, man. Again, if you only think that your show will be good because you're chatting to like the biggest, most famous, the top leaders or whatever, no, wrong attitude completely. Like you go and see the value in people that are going to give you the best content otherwise, right? Sidebar. Okay. Stories that'll make it into a news bulletin, not just the scheduled sports bulletin. I need to have a strong hook. All stories have to have a strong hook, right? So write the story for the news that is most important. Make sure it's short, sharp, and to the point. Now, for the sports segment itself that follows, rewrite that copy, changing the angle, adding detail, or starting with a reaction in order to grab the listener's attention at the beginning, right? So, in other words, the inverted pyramid of news writing, right? So, do not ever use the same script. Really update those bulletins every time you come back on air. Because why? Why? Because it's your job, and I'm not being funny, but that's why you do it, right? You can't just sit there and rinse cycle repeat stuff, right? Scores and scorers are an important detail and should never, ever, ever be omitted when it comes to sports, right? And trying to add another level of interest. Though, however, brief, little bit of you, little bit, not a little bit of you, a little bit of, well, I say a personal context, like a little bit of a, personal context that makes that kind of sports story pop. Yeah. So just like with anything on radio, it's about sound variety, and everyone loves hearing the voices of their favorite sports stars. So don't forget about those sound bites, right? So please don't do not want to hear people. Sorry, people don't want to hear your opinion, but prefer listening to the experts because they are experts for a reason. So rather pull from the coach, rather pull from the captain, rather pull from one of these sports athletes, rather pull from the organizer, right? And include that as a soundbite rather than anything else, right? Never miss an opportunity to get a soundbite from a player or a coach. It really adds variety, but also adds like quality to your whole bulletin itself. I'm just going to zoom in here so we can just have a look at, like, for example, one of the bulletins that are written. So not really the bulletins, one of the stories within the bulletin itself, right? Okay. So Itumeleng Kune gets a contract with Manchester United. That's the headline over there, right? So that would be included in the other headlines, right? So please, you don't announce a headline and then do a story, another headline, and then into another story, right? Right. Remember where the headlines belong within any news story. It's in the beginning, right? Okay. So the actual copy, here we go, right? The Kaiser Chiefs captain has signed a contract at the age of 32 to play for the most popular English Premier League club in the world. Itumeleng Kune, and I might be pronouncing that incorrectly. I'd have to go and YouTube it, remember, for pronunciation, right? First played for Soweto-based club Kaiser Chiefs in 1999, but its goalkeeping skills only came to fore in the public eye at its Premier Soccer League debut in 2007. In 2009, he enjoyed the national side and has been the first choice for goalkeeper ever since. So Kune also holds the title of being one of the only two goalkeepers to be sent off the field during a FIFA World Cup game. Kune says that he is looking forward to joining the team at Old Trafford to start training in August. That's a big thing, right? Massive. We always like it when any South African does really well. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm not sure whether the story is true. Again, there's my proficiency in sport. Oh my word, right? We have another one here. Okay. Um, so it's my confusion a little bit because now we have this massive headline, and I don't want you to confuse. Um, I don't want you to confuse what a headline is in terms of um the traditional version of it. I'd rather you keep your approach to saying headlines are headlines and stories are stories, right? Okay, but anyway, let's read. At the end of the day, let's look at the story and let's see how this might actually play out on air, right? Across South Africa, it's safe to assume that most people will know the name Itumeleng Khune, right? And will have some idea of soccer as a highly popular and closely followed sport in the country. Um, and will have, yeah, that's right. Okay. It is also likely that as a captain of the national side and leading PSL team, Kaiser Chiefs, such a high profile player being drafted into a top English Premier League team will be highly newsworthy as any change in this is not, what am I doing here? No. This is analyzing. Oh, please apologize. I apologize for that. So this is telling you why we're writing this story over here. No wonder it didn't make sense to me. Ah, man. Okay. All right. So there we go. Never mind. Well, okay, I made a boo-boo right there, right, in terms of reading it. This is a story. Okay, this makes sense, right? So this is obviously just in terms of justifying why it is we decided to go and include that as our headline over there, because people know who Tumeleng is, and we also know who Man United is, and so that's good enough for, right? So the body copy itself, factual research as to obviously things that we do know about Kaiser Chiefs, about let's say it's Itumeleng, let's say he's transitioned between obviously the beginning of his career into the current we're in it wherever or whenever this particular story was written, right? Okay, and then in the last line here we are trying to again we're trying to the last most important fact or note, right? Okay, about the story. Here we're answering a question that most listeners are likely to have. So when will this actual new contract start? Well, providing a personal point of view from the player, etc., etc. Right? Okay, let's move on. Right? Excuse me. So here are some sources. Right? We do find the sources, just like a news anchor would find their sources in, for example, emergency services. Excuse me. Right? Really battling with my pronunciation this week, but yeah, okay. Um, all right. As much players are not your friends, as much as the players are not your friends, well, you should keep in touch with obviously players so they can really tell you, like like I'll be here, I'll be there, or the team will be here, the team will be there, we're playing this. You don't worry, like we can organize your pass, whatever it may be, right? Okay, normally there's a PR person which you should be more friends with, okay, and that sounds terrible because it sounds like you're using them, but it's not. It's not. It's business. It's work. That's what we do with connections, right? So you're not always going to need them to comment on something negative often, right? Okay, it's just to talk about a good result. You know how well they did, how proud they are of the team. Like let's say I played that day, executed perfectly, that type of stuff, right? So to preview a major tournament or to comment on a fellow athlete's success, right? Okay, it's a celebration, right? So develop a strong contact list and protect it so that those details do not get anywhere, right? Because just like predominantly more with soccer, not soccer, sports stars, because they are our most famous, right? Celebrities here in South Africa, much bigger than DJs, much bigger than actors, much bigger than politicians, right? You really, really, really do not want to be that person that leaves their phone lying around, or whatever it is, or like in a drunken feud with your friends. They're like, oh, like I've got Rassi Erasmus's number. Look at this guy, cool I am. Please don't do that, right? Anyway, again, in South Africa, always have sources or contacts within the following two big organizations: the Department of Sports and Recreation, for sure, and then obviously South African Sports Confederation and Olympic Committee, SASCOC, right? Okay. Just want to go to the next one over here. We're nearly done. Okay, sponsors are also very important context, but this is tricky to navigate because they are an important source of information, but they also are going to try to they're going to try, obviously, punt themselves. Does that make sense? Punt also their team, punt, 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 punt. So we're getting a little bit of bias, you understand? And also, we don't want free marketing for the product. So we don't want to open up our platform. Once again, just like we do with anyone else, you can't just come on and start, punting your concert and your t-shirts and your whatever, your albums or whatever it is, like shamelessly. You can't do that. So we need to be careful about sponsors coming in there, because they only have one interest at heart, and that is making their name bigger and obviously bringing in profit, right? More so than, let's say, highlighting the actual team itself. So think of, let's say, why you would speak to a sponsor as opposed to, let's say, a team captain, right? Doesn't make sense, right? Keep in mind that they'll probably want something in return. There you go, publicity, right? So make sure that you evaluate what they are giving you and be careful on how you represent them in the story itself, right? Social media. More importantly, here is, like, this is the only time I would actually think is a real valid reason to mention a, let's say, sponsor, is when they actually buy over a team. So they become an official sponsor. That's it. Why would you? Why would there be any need, right, to mention them otherwise? But you would have to say it's like the Red Bull Springboks, or it won't be Springboks, but let's say Red Bull Proteas, or the Red Bull Chiefs, or the whatever it may be, right? Okay, trying to think of the sports ones now, the Bulls and stuff like that, right? Bulls, the Lions. I was going to say Dolphins. It's not Dolphins, right? I get that, but yeah. Anyway, right? Bears, etc. I'm not sure, right? Okay, Bears sounds right. Social media is an important source of information, but it's notoriously unreliable. I do know this as well. So that's my alarm coming there, but I woke up earlier. I showed that alarm anyway. Anyway, you couldn't hear the alarm. The alarm went off anyway. Sidebar. Okay, use it as a source, but only as a starting point for sure. Absolutely. And also, that's something that we spoke about in class, when we spoke about citizen journalism, right? And how it does play a part, and big part, right, in being a lead for a possible story, right? Never use social media posts without an independent verification of that information, right? So fact checking is not only because it's the ethical thing to do, right? So to give our audiences the correct and true information, truthful facts about a story, but also, like, your entire career and your reputation rides on it too, right? So if you are at an event like a news conference or a post-match media briefing, make sure that you get the scores, names, and relevant information, such as designations of people, correct, right? So in sport, there is always someone listening who knows more than you, right? That is why we never look, never mind in sports, definitely in sports, please, okay, because fanatics are fanatics, right? Never, so they don't even have to be experts. I'm saying to experts like, oh, they are teaching soccer somewhere, whatever. No, they just have to love, like love the sport, and they will know everything around it. Think about yourself as a fan, like a number one fan to something in your own life. You know everything about that person or that product or that cartoon or that thing, whatever it is. Like, you know everything, you know so much, right? Be careful, right? So what you do also is you always lean on an expert to rather take the flack, as opposed to you trying to be a professional, right? I'm saying an expert professional in a particular, let's say, this is a niche field. The sports are niche, right? Each sport, I'm saying, within or under the banner of sport, is niche. So rather speak or include expert professionals, right? Be very careful about how you decide your ego takes over and you just rant. And when I say you just let your things come out of your mouth, man. Again, I don't know the proper English right now for that. Right. Okay. They will also stop listening if your information is unreliable. In turn, obviously, you'll have a negative impact on the radio show as well as the station too. So becoming an expert, you have to regardless. As I said to you before, like you need to keep going and making yourself better at what it is that you are doing, right? So if you're going to be exclusively commentating and specialize, obviously, in one sport only, right? Not many, one sport, either cricket, either rugby, either soccer, either tennis, whatever it is, because there is so much to learn, right, around that sport too, right? The never-ending history, the never-ending amount of players, the never-ending amount of plays, that type of stuff, right? So you'll possibly get work on radio and TV, and you could become the go-to expert for other journalists, right? However, if you're going to be compiling and presenting bulletins for general consumption, you'll have to become a jack of all trades. So you have to know something about more than something, but something about every single sport, right? Okay. So know your audience, and if you are a soccer or rugby, if they are soccer or rugby fanatics, you'll need to know a lot about that sport because you tend to want going to be covering that sport more than the other sports that are included or are inclusive in your bulletin, right? So here are some sports interviewing tips. Prepare and research the subject well. Few things will irritate an interview more than talking to someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, right? I laugh because you think that that doesn't happen. We see it all the time. Never mind, we know that it exists, okay? Please, oh my word, it is awful. To hear it anywhere in media shows that you have no respect, absolutely no respect for the craft, but also absolutely no respect for that person that you're speaking to or taking a moment out of their time, right, to provide some kind of content for your station and your obviously brand, whatever it may be, right? Prepare a guide of questions like you would with the interview that we have covered before, right? But then try not to read them off, right? Make it conversational, be interactive, have follow-up questions. Again, everything like that, because you are researched well, you will be able to do this, right? Listen to the answers, listen to the interview. We guide the direction of the interview, we control where it should go, right? So you need to make sure that you cover all of the matches, right, of the day, regardless of whether you personally support the team or not. Of course, I mean, come on, and never show bias against your own national team. Although criticism and providing a platform for debating is absolutely what you should do, right? Okay. So, yes, okay, fine. So we've been let down many, many times by our national soccer team. But you know, and we've got to tell the truth. One, it's also still our team as well, you know. And again, that doesn't mean having to be nice to them, but we've had enough bad press that we cover. I'm saying around Bafana, right? And so on and so forth. That you know this to be true. Do your job, okay? Homework is activity 5. B questions 1, page 206. So let's quickly close up with this. This one here.
Right, Brian?
Yes, Stan, it was quite the test for the Gamecocks as we approach the back end of the regular season for South Carolina. Well, the Gamecocks softball team has been solid at home all year long, including wins over top 10 opponents throughout the entire season. This weekend, they got another crack at a top team in the country, the number 7 seeded Auburn.
I just want you to note, and you see that kind of it's a creative it's that creative element, that kind of like that smash, that you know, whatever it is. These words you wouldn't use in a bulletin, right? A news bulletin, but you're more than welcome in including it and all of the other words like this, whatever it is. This approach to your sports, right? So this guy's doing well. You can see kind of that energy. That's a lot, much more of a difference than there is of that kind of monotone delivery in news. Let's listen.
Tigers. Let's take it to Beckham Field. Third inning, Victoria Williams clubs one deep to center field. That'll one-hop the wall. The double brings home 2 for South Carolina. Gamecocks strike first. It's 2-0. Later, Carolina catches in again, this time on an Auburn miscue. Catcher drops the ball. Carly Wallace airmails one into left field. Gamecocks scratch home another one, and that's all they would need. Nikki Blue and Jessica Elliott shut down the Tigers to only allowing 2 hits in the ballgame en route to a 3-0 shutout. Carolina with another win over a top 10 team. They're back in action on the road against UGA this Friday night. To the golf course, where one South Carolina women's golfer shined at the 2017 SEC Championships in Hoover this weekend. Golfer Caitlin Dambaugh took home medalist honors at this year's SEC Championship Sunday afternoon. Dambaugh is the second Gamecock in program history to capture SEC Championship medalist honors, and the senior from Goose Creek said it's important to stay loose throughout the day's play.
I don't know, I just went out there and played, and, me and Coach just went out there and tried to have fun, and she said if we had fun, then we'd do some special things, and we did.
And that they did. Next up for Dambaugh and the Gamecocks is the NCAA Regionals set for May 8th through the 10th. Carolina will learn its fate this Thursday during the Women's Golf Selection Show. Well, the Columbia Fireflies begin a 3-game series tonight against Asheville at Spirit Communications Park. It's also USC night at the ballpark as Carolina students and staff get into the game for free. That's nothing, zilch, zip, zero, free. Students receive a free ticket and meal voucher with a valid Carolina card, and first pitch is slated for 7:05 tonight. The Fireflies are looking to shake a 2-game losing streak. Harold Gonzalez will get the start for the Flies. It's playoff season. The ice and hardwood are hot right now as both leagues, the NBA and NHL, are in the middle of a playoff stretch. Let's start with the NBA playoffs. The Jazz and Clippers from Utah. Joe Johnson took over in the fourth quarter. He attacks Mbah Moute with the floater, game tied at 87. More Johnson now with 4 to play. Off the pick and roll, he cuts through the double team. Another soft J as it comes right here through the double team. Jazz have a 1-point lead. Johnson scored 22 of Utah's 25 points in the fourth quarter and facilitated right here off the bounce. And Jamal Crawford throws in the corner. Joe Ingles puts it away for 3. Johnson turned back the clock to 07-08, and the Jazz tied the series at 2 games apiece as it heads to L.A. tomorrow night. Now the NHL sends in Bruins from Boston. Overtime, Ottawa on the power play. Derek Brassard down low in front to Clark MacArthur. Game over, series over. Senators advance and will play the Rangers in the next round. To Toronto, another overtime game. Caps and Leafs tied at 1 off the faceoff. Kuznetsov moves to John Carlson. Along the boards of Justin Williams. He comes in, hammers one, it's deflected in. Marcus Johansson plays hero for Washington. Capitals move on. They'll play Pittsburgh in the next round of the playoffs. The SEC Track and Field Conference Championships are coming to USC on May 11th. The Gamecocks are expected to make the presence known with their core group of male throwers who are leading the SEC this season. Our Brian Solomon takes a look into this group to see why they've been so successful.
If you travel to the throwing circles at Krager Track, you'll find a group of throwers on the USC track and field team that are quietly becoming the most dominant group of throwers in the SEC.
We can definitely compete with anyone in the country.
We're up there with the best.
So you say you guys are pretty deep?
Yeah, I say we're pretty deep.
It's just so deep, like every single practice, everybody's getting after each other.
I feel like that we have a really good collection of talent. We have 3 really good shot putters. We have a hammer thrower. We just have a really good connection. And all of us, we work very hard in the weight room and out in practice. And, it's a good bond to have a lot of kids that are at a high level because then we push each other. Even though we don't all do the same event, we get it all in together and we come together and work hard and we support each other.
Freshman Eric Favors, junior Ben Bonhurst, junior Joshua Awatunde, and senior Clarence Gallup are all ranked top 10 in shot put, discus, and hammer throw in the SEC, with Joshua Awatunde leading the way, ranked 6th in the country. Awatunde finished 5th at Indoor Nationals in the shot put and is a reigning outdoor All-American. And while it's a team effort, their success starts with Awatunde.
Josh, obviously, the experience of just being here for 4 years, he bought into the system and results are there.
My domain right here, this is my house. I live here. I run this whole shit. This is all on me. This is my house.
Tunde leads it right now, so I just want to take him on every single practice and I want to beat him.
And while they've had success so far, there's still more to come.
You don't really want to go big too early. You know, you want to save it for the end of the season because in May, that's when things get tougher. That's when competition gets steep, and you know that's when the money comes.
We're coming along real nice, and I think by the end of the season, we're going to surprise some people.
The sky's the limit for real.
I don't mean. You come out here, you're going to get messed up. It's going to be a bad day for you. Real bad.
Yeah.
Brian Solomon, Carolina News.
The Gamecocks travel to the University of Pennsylvania this weekend to compete in the Penn Relays, where Awatunde, he's a bad man, that guy, threw the collegiate meet record for discus last year. So, guys, it's very awesome to see not only so many players in basketball, but obviously on the track and field do so well in this time of the year.
You're right. And I was at the track meet this past weekend. Those guys sure can sling it.
I really not including that woman. Oh my word! Anyway, he was very good and you can see it's obviously a small station, but it doesn't matter. Like a good anchor is a good anchor. You know, I also like the way that when he obviously stepped over his words, you know, made a mistake, he just recovered and he carried on. You know. That's a big deal. Just recover, come back, and carry on, you know? All right. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm just stop that share over there. I hope you found that interesting, cool. And then I will see you for our face-to-face, please, next weekend. Cheers.